In a world where magic and monsters were the norm, a lone adventurer dared to break a taboo. A certain noble's diary stated that devouring monsters was forbidden. For a human, eating a monster meant absorbing its evil essence. The first symptom of this absorption was an indescribable euphoria, accompanied by a strengthening of the body. The second symptom brought severe headaches, nausea, and intoxication. The third symptom was sudden death, or, possibly, the transformation of the consumer into a monster. A few days ago, in the vast world where magic and monsters were common, there was the Frontier City, a territory that housed several labyrinths. Among these labyrinths was one called the Miasma Labyrinth. The air inside this labyrinth continuously corroded the state of visiting adventurers. Most adventurers hated it, but one person was different from the others. Instead of avoiding the labyrinth, he frequented it. Soon, he became known as the Miasma Digger. But he didn't go to the labyrinth just to get high on miasma. He ventured there to harvest herbs that could only be acquired in these specific conditions. Most adventurers couldn't last even on the first floors of the dungeon, allowing him to monopolize these herbs easily. The miasma grass he harvested had the effect of purifying the miasma, becoming an irreplaceable source of income for him. However, he knew very well the rules of supply and demand, so he only took what was necessary, an amount that would last about 3 days. With this, he left the labyrinth with a satisfied expression, knowing he would eat well that night. But after all, this was still a labyrinth, and as Rudy was on the 6th floor, he easily encountered monsters along the way. These weren't just any grown rats. They were miasma rats, creatures famous for their toxic miasma and venom. This didn't surprise Rudy, as many of the monsters living there operated with these harmful elements, contributing to most adventurers avoiding this place like the plague. Against him, however, this didn't work. He easily ignored their attacks, traversing the mist and quickly killing the nearest rat with a precise blow. But the rats were relentless. Even after seeing their companion taken down, they didn't hesitate to lunge at Rudy with reckless abandon. He managed to kill the first one but missed the second, giving it the opportunity to lunge at him, aiming to bite his entire hand. When the rat's teeth were dangerously close to penetrating his skin, a sudden shout of "Fireball!" echoed through the labyrinth, diverting his attention. The next thing Rudy saw was the rat engulfed in burning flames. The force of the fireball was so intense that it knocked the rat to the other side of the wall, where it exploded upon impact, sending pieces of fur and smoldering flesh into the air. Rudy was stunned, as he had never seen such a powerful spell before. His train of thought was interrupted when he heard the spellcaster sighing in frustration, lamenting that they had missed their intended target. They spoke without apologies, as if Rudy weren't even there. From what he understood, it seemed these adventurers were aiming at him instead of the rat. But, as they inadvertently saved his life, they simply didn't care, continuing their conversation as if nothing had happened. Rudy had seen these faces many times in the Adventurers Guild, which made him even more irritated. It seemed they knew him but didn't consider him significant. Even when they extended a hand to help him up, he knew it was all an act. So, he ignored their gesture, expressed his gratitude for the sentiment, but firmly stated that he would appreciate a warning before they did anything. This didn't sit well with them, especially the one who had cast the fireball. He had already saved Rudy, so he didn't like the fact that Rudy was being ungrateful and still complaining. But before things got out of hand, their attention was diverted by a group member who had discovered the colony of miasma grass they were looking for. This delighted his companions but surprised Rudy, as he realized these adventurers were following him because they wanted his harvesting spot. The mage couldn't let Rudy accuse them of such underhanded tactics. He glared at Rudy and made it clear they weren't what he thought. They were just adventurers making a living in the labyrinth and happened to find him there and saved him while doing so. But it seemed that was a mistake because the miasma scavenger, like Rudy, couldn't even say a proper word of gratitude. The last part of the sentence hung in the air like a veiled threat, and Rudy knew they were lying. But he also understood the situation. These adventurers were stronger than he was and outnumbered him. He had no chance of surviving if he fought them. Swallowing his pride, he lowered his head, apologized for accusing them, and thanked them for saving him. The words tasted bitter, but there was nothing else he could do. Suppressing the anger that simmered inside him, he maintained his composure, knowing survival was more important than his wounded pride at that moment. A few moments later, Rudy returned to his base, eating at the F Belly restaurant. But even there, he couldn't recover. He was unceremoniously expelled because, whenever he was at the restaurant, the smell made the food taste horrible. They insisted he should abandon his dream of being an adventurer, as he clearly wasn't one. An adventurer needed to have the skill to defeat monsters, and someone like him, with a useless abnormal status nullification skill, wasn't made for that role. As Rudy lay on the ground defenseless, the mocking words rang in his ears. He couldn't even disagree with them. It was true that his unique skill, abnormal status nullification, was useful for exploring the Miasma Labyrinth, but it didn't give him the necessary skills to defeat monsters, something vital for adventurers. And, as someone who had no combat skills, he wasn't welcome in any group and was even called a miasma scavenger, because he always searched for items in the lower levels of the Miasma Labyrinth. In other words, his so-called skill made him a failure as an adventurer. As an adult man, he was still fighting life-and-death battles against mere rats. This realization left him hopeless. He began to question if he would continue living his life as a miasma scavenger, a job that sustained him for a long time but offered no real future. But without other skills, it seemed he was destined to remain a scavenger in the Miasma Labyrinth. No friends, no hobbies, and his life was always empty, without purpose. Even so, he continued. When the next day arrived, Rudy went straight to the Adventure Guild. He arrived early because he needed to find another colony while he still had some money. As he walked through the corridors, he noticed an unusual commotion, which made him wonder what was happening. But that wasn't his concern. He went straight to the receptionist and asked if any requests had come in. She informed him that a new labyrinth had been discovered. The news shocked him. A labyrinth was a place full of treasures and magical items, a golden opportunity for any adventurer. No wonder the guild was so noisy. But then the receptionist conveyed another piece of news that shocked him even more, and this time it was bad. The price of the miasma herb he usually brought had dropped as of today. He immediately asked the reason, and she explained that the miasma labyrinth was never popular, and now with everyone focused on the new labyrinth, there would be no demand for the miasma herb. This left him in disbelief. The livelihood he depended on had become obsolete overnight. It seemed he had no choice but to venture into the new labyrinth in the Alo Mountains. However, the receptionist informed him that he couldn't do that. The exploration requirement for the new labyrinth was to be of higher rank, and as a low-ranking adventurer, he was not qualified. He gritted his teeth in frustration and tried to convince the receptionist, but to no avail. She was just following the rules and believed that even if he went, he would end up dying in vain. She couldn't allow that. Her conscience wouldn't let her. With that, dread set in. Without any other source of income, he was on the brink of homelessness, doomed to disappear over time. Fortunately for Rudy, he wasn't left to despair. His plight was heard by another adventurer who happened to need a porter. The adventurer asked Rudy if he was willing to join the group. With no other options and the man seeming reliable, Rudy accepted the offer. So, they immediately set off in a carriage towards the new labyrinth. The group consisted of 4 members, including Rudy, but the atmosphere was tense and strange. The blonde adventurer who had recruited him broke the tension with small talk, expressing his relief at finding Rudy. He mentioned that he wanted someone to carry materials from the new labyrinth, but couldn't find anyone available. Probably because all the adventurers in the guild were banding together in the new labyrinth, making it hard to get a porter. However, the other group members began to question the blonde adventurer, asking why he chose to dive with a miasma scavenger. Couldn't he find someone better? The blonde adventurer couldn't allow internal fights in his team, especially before they even reached the destination. So, he did his best to ease the situation, explaining that since Rudy had been an adventurer for a long time, he believed it was better to have him rather than a novice. After calming the initial discord, Bayer redirected the conversation by reintroducing himself. He announced that he was the leader of the Scarlet Sword. Then he introduced his companions, Sasha and Rick, both adventurers of the same rank as him. Out of courtesy, Rudy also introduced himself. With the introductions out of the way, Bayer mentioned that before venturing into the labyrinth, he would like to know more about Rudy's capabilities. Rudy showed him his guild card, and to Bayer's surprise, he noticed that Rudy could use fire magic. Rudy quickly clarified that although his power was too low for combat, it was useful in dark places and for cooking. But before he could elaborate further, Bayer simply smiled and assured him that his skills were indeed useful and that he would count on him. A few moments later, they arrived at the newly discovered Avelio Labyrinth. The excitement was palpable, as they seemed to be the first to arrive. With hope and dreams fueling their steps, they ran toward the entrance, eager to explore the labyrinth's unknown depths. But as they opened the labyrinth's main door, they were greeted by loud noises. The adventurers had already crowded the place. So, they ventured deeper inside, only to find the labyrinth occupied at every turn, from herb gathering to monster fighting and treasure hunting. Every place was already taken, and adventurers were everywhere. This immediately irritated Sasha, who threw a tantrum by kicking stones in frustration. Thus, Bayer concluded that most of the first layer had already been explored. This led Rick to suggest that they dive deeper, believing there would be fewer people further down. Sasha quickly supported the idea, but as a veteran, Rude disagreed. He believed it would be better to start mapping the first layer of this newly discovered labyrinth, but his suggestion was abruptly interrupted by Sasha and Rick, who criticized him for expressing his opinion. They reminded him that as a porter, he shouldn't voice his thoughts, and that was why he was stuck in rank, accusing him of having a weak will. Fortunately, Bayer intervened immediately, defusing the fight. Once again, reprimanding his team. However, he acknowledged both perspectives and agreed that if things continued like this, they wouldn't achieve good results. Therefore, they would need to delve even deeper into the labyrinth in hopes of finding less competition and greater rewards. With that decision made, they entered the fourth layer of the labyrinth. Upon arrival, they encountered fierce beasts that attacked right away. Rude quickly became the target as the beast sensed his weakness. Fortunately, Rick was there to save him, but not without teasing him for being scared and calling him old. Sasha and Bayer weren't far behind either, showcasing their enhanced skills and efficiently dealing with all approaching monsters. Witnessing such prowess for the first time changed Rude's perspective. They were strong, much stronger than he would ever become. Meanwhile, he was paralyzed with fear, unable to move. At that moment, he realized that perhaps he wasn't meant to be an adventurer. A few moments later, they managed to kill the pack of wolves that had attacked. This victory reinforced their belief that diving deeper was the right decision. It was refreshing not to have other people around. The monsters weren't too strong, and they even found some treasures. Overall, it was a successful incursion. When Rude thought things were going smoothly, Rick ordered him to collect materials from the monsters they had defeated. Rude responded politely, explaining that he couldn't collect the materials because the monsters were too damaged and the magic stones were likely broken. This didn't please Rick, who, with anger in his eyes, insisted that Rude hadn't looked yet and couldn't be sure if the stones were broken. He ordered Rude to do as he was told and not slack off. Since they had hired him as a porter and Rick had saved him several times, Rude obeyed. But as he suspected, the monsters were all mutilated, their guts and blood creating a horrible smell that made it difficult to collect the stones. He thought of using his fire ability to burn the corpses and disguise the bad smell a bit. However, this led to more taunts from Rick, who laughed and suggested it looked like Rude was about to eat the monster corpses. He couldn't deny that. After so long exploring, he was starting to feel hungry, and even the monster meat seemed appealing. Sasha looked at Rick with disgust for thinking that, not only because it was gross, but also because eating monsters was taboo among adventurers. The mana absorbed in their bodies could have unpredictable effects. Rick smiled, seeing how serious she was, and clarified that he was just joking. He assured them that when they returned, he would use the money they earned to eat all the delicious food they wanted. But their conversation was abruptly interrupted by a loud roar echoing through the ground. Looking toward the source, they realized they were in trouble. A level B Minotaur was staring at them as if they were a snack. Finding such a high-ranking monster in such a shallow den was unexpected, indicating that this labyrinth was much more dangerous than they initially thought. But knowing this wouldn't save them, so panic set in. There was no way they could defeat something like that. As the leader, Bayer took action and asked Rude to hand him his backpack, stating that he needed the items inside to save them. Without question, Rude handed over his backpack. Bayer then instructed Rude to keep an eye on the monster's movements, which he did. But as the monster approached, Rude asked Bayer about his plan, or even if he had one. Bayer smiled, stating that he had a great plan. Rude's back was slashed, leaving him staggering in pain, and this action caused the others to unleash their abilities. Rick used the warrior's encouragement, making Rude the focus of the monster's attacks, while Sasha cast haste, doubling her own speed. Their coordination was impeccable, and Rude realized these guys had planned to abandon him from the start. Bayer confirmed Rude's suspicions with a wicked smile. Why else would they bring the miasma scavenger if not to be the target of their twisted, sadistic game? Rude's eyes widened, realizing those he thought were allies had abandoned him to die. The Minotaur was just one more threat. Even without it, they would have betrayed him to such a cruel fate. The only thing Rude could do was scream, but even that was abruptly interrupted when he realized the Minotaur was about to swing its axe. Fortunately, adrenaline kicked in, and in one last effort, he managed to dodge the attack just in time. This unexpected feat made him smile a bit. He hadn't realized he was capable of such agility. However, he had exhausted all his remaining energy, and the monster was very close. Thus, he accepted his fate, thinking it was better than dying homeless and penniless. But the pain brought him back to reality. He hadn't expected it to hurt so much. He didn't get the instant death he hoped for, which made him feel the pain for much longer. When he thought things couldn't get worse, the wall they had just broken revealed a deep, dark hole. Beyond it, the sight of the abyss made his stomach turn. Even the Minotaur seemed to realize it had messed up. A few moments later, Rude opened his eyes to a faint green light that barely let him see what surrounded him. Confused about why he was still alive, he noticed that the Minotaur had gotten stuck under him, cushioning his fall. But this was only a matter of time, as half of his body was broken, and the excruciating pains made each breath a struggle. He knew that even if no other monster found him, he would likely die from blood loss or starvation long before his body had a chance to heal. So, he went back to sleep, but hunger tormented him, waking him up again. He hadn't eaten since yesterday, after being thrown out of the restaurant. His body screamed for food, and the idea of eating the Minotaur crossed his mind, making him laugh bitterly. Everyone knew that eating a monster only led to disaster. Closing his eyes once more, he reflected on the miserable life he had lived as he hovered on the edge of consciousness. A memory surfaced, a voice from long ago belonging to someone whose face he no longer remembered echoed in his mind. This person always told him that no matter how difficult or painful it was, he should never give up. And before he realized it, he was already eating the Minotaur, chewing its raw flesh. Despite knowing the risks, when a human with depleted magic consumes monster meat rich in mana, the monster's mana particles invade their body, leading to a monstrous state. This fate is more terrifying than dying from poison, making it a taboo. But to recover the blood he had lost and satisfy his hunger, Rude made a gamble, provoking an unexpected transformation. Thanks to his unique ability, he completely avoided turning into a monster by absorbing enough mana from the high-level beast. His body began to heal at an accelerated rate. The broken arm and slashed back were now healed as if they had never been damaged. Suddenly, a burst of mana filled his body, strengthening him like never before. The abilities began to manifest. He had acquired the Minotaur's abilities, including Roar, Battle Axe Mastery, and Physical Boost. Rude's body began to move automatically, guided by instinct, through the dimly lit corridors. He wandered aimlessly, driven by an insatiable hunger in search of more monsters to devour. But he didn't need to search for long. A swarm of monstrous bats noticed his presence and rushed towards him without hesitation. Despite their numbers, they were no match for his newly acquired abilities. With a powerful roar, he instantly killed many of the bats. Those who survived were debilitated by a penalty, leaving them unable to flee and provoked to attack him. As soon as the bats approached, Rude activated his physical boost, temporarily increasing his strength to swing his enormous axe, killing the bats in a single powerful sweep. Without hesitation, he began to feed once more. With the newly gained echolocation ability, he could detect creatures around him even in the darkness, making the previously dimly lit labyrinth as clear as day. Now he could see the labyrinth's structure and the location of approaching monsters, drawn by the sounds of battle. Despite the overwhelming odds, Rude laughed maniacally. He wondered which of the monsters would be next to be devoured. As predicted by his new ability, a mass of monsters emerged from the darkness, attacking in unison. But with his enhanced skills, he eliminated them as soon as they were within reach. The thrill of his newfound power surged through him. Just a few days ago, he had struggled against mere rats, but now even monsters far above his rank fell like butter before his axe. A few moments later, Rude emerged from the labyrinth's entrance, finally seeing the light of day once again. He hadn't expected to make it back, but he survived, exhilarated. Meanwhile, inside the Adventurers Guild, everyone was discussing recent events with worried expressions. A tragedy had occurred in the labyrinth, and at the center of it was Bayer's group, who had reported the incident to Lank Kars, the guild master of the Ballona branch. After hearing the report, Lanks gathered all the adventurers who had been in the labyrinth, except for Rude, who was still missing. Bayer confirmed this with a sorrowful expression, explaining that when they encountered a minotaur on the 4th floor, Rude was killed before they even had a chance to protect him. Even Sasha and Rick put on Oscar-worthy performances, crying as if they were genuinely mourning. Lanks believed their story for now, understanding the gravity of the situation. For the time being, he prohibited entry into the labyrinth. Even the receptionist was disturbed, believing the adventurer she regularly saw would never return. To her surprise, that very adventurer suddenly appeared right at the door. His arrival shocked everyone, especially the trio. They began sweating profusely, but Bayer quickly composed himself and acted accordingly. He ran towards Rude, pretending to be relieved to see him alive and well. In reality, he approached to threaten Rude, warning that if he said anything unnecessary, he would kill him on the spot. And, just as before, Bayer's cronies followed suit, acting like friends as if they hadn't just tried to kill him. Even Sasha had the audacity to claim they had tried to go back for him but couldn't because the labyrinth was closed. Despite the absurdity, Rude appeared dazed and compliant, leading Bayer to gleefully proclaim a celebration of his survival, suggesting they move to a more isolated place. However, something was wrong. An intense pressure emanated from Rude, making them unable to move. This was incomprehensible to them, but before they could react, Rude told everyone the truth. He declared that these guys had used him as a pawn. Judging by everyone's reaction, Rude was right. Bayer knew they were screwed if he didn't clear things up. So, he shakily asked Rude what he was talking about, but Rude ignored him, indifferent to his panic. This prompted Lank Kars to intervene and ask Rude what he meant by being used as a pawn. Rude recounted what had happened. They had stolen his supplies and attacked him from behind. Rick used an ability to lure the Minotaur to him, and then Sasha cast a spell so they could escape immediately. Bayer approached Lanks, trying to convince him that they hadn't done any of that. But Lanks knew better. He had been in the business long enough to spot a two-faced liar when he saw one. To clarify the truth of the matter, Lanks mentioned that he had a guest who could help them, and from the shadows, a girl dressed in a violet cloak emerged. Her mere presence made it clear she was a truth officer. This revelation completely shocked the trio, as truth officers rarely left the royal capital. So, they demanded to know why she was there at such a convenient moment. Lanks confirmed it wasn't a coincidence. He had already suspected them, as there had been an exceptionally high number of deaths among the porters who temporarily joined their group. So, he called in an old favor to bring the truth officer there. Without further delay, the truth officer did her work with just one glance at the group. She revealed to everyone that the members of the Scarlet Sword were lying and that Rudd's claims were true. Bayer was in a state of shock, his world crumbling so quickly that he couldn't comprehend it. The reputation he had meticulously built collapsed when everyone immediately turned against him and his group. Desperate, he panicked and questioned the truth officer, demanding to know what someone like her could possibly know. Lankars was perplexed by Bayer's audacity. Nonetheless, he responded for the benefit of those who didn't know, explaining that truth officers possessed an ability that was impossible to acquire later in life. An ability whose effectiveness rivaled that of a unique skill. It was the truth skill, and no lie could pass before it. And what could be more reliable than the words of someone who had committed to the country? For Bayer to question this power was a taboo for adventurers. Moreover, he had intentionally harmed his companions and used them as disposable pawns. Thus, Lank concluded that even if they continued to investigate, it was certain that the Scarlet Sword members' adventurer qualifications would be revoked, and all of them would be reduced to slavery. This decree shattered the trio's world. They never expected things to worsen so quickly, but unlike the other two who fell to the ground in despair, Bayer was consumed by rage, not wanting to become a slave. He began to blame others for his failures and accused the truth officer of ruining everything. If only she hadn't been there, they would have gotten away with it. In a blind fury, Bayer launched himself at the truth officer with the intent to kill her. Lank knew he shouldn't intervene. He understood that she could handle herself and could easily kill Bayer if she wanted to. Even the truth officer was shocked to see someone so foolish. But Rudd, on the other hand, didn't know this. So, he decided to intervene. He blocked Bayer's advance and warned him never to dare touch the truth officer. Bayer couldn't believe what he was seeing. The weakling he knew had appeared in front of him so quickly and blocked his attack without breaking a sweat. But before Bayer could launch another attack, Rudd threw a punch, sending Bayer's ugly face flying across the room. The impact was so strong that it left Sasha and Rick frozen in place. It was evident that Rudd had truly changed. Something had definitely happened to him inside the labyrinth, stopping Bayer's advance and punching him in the face, making him fly across the room. Rudd sat in front of Lankar in the reception room of the Adventurers Guild with a tense yet formal atmosphere. Lankar apologized for bothering him so soon after returning from such an exhausting trial, acknowledging that Rudd must be tired. However, this meeting was a necessary formality after the scandal that had occurred. Rudd, though tired, assured Lankar that he didn't mind. He was more concerned about the fate of the three who had wronged him. With that in mind, he asked Lankar about their punishment. Lankar explained that the three members of the Scarlet Sword would be taken by the team and subjected to an interrogation. If it was confirmed that they were guilty of incidents using their porters as bait, they would lose all their possessions and adventurer qualifications, ultimately being reduced to slavery. And Bayer went so far as to report the truth officers that would probably never present themselves to him again, which was a relief for Rudd. This news was comforting, and he felt satisfied, ready to leave. But before he could go, Lankar's assistant handed him a bag of coins, explaining that it contained the profits obtained from the new labyrinth. Since his teammates had lost their rights to it, it was only fair that he received it. Inside the bag were 200,000 heen, which surprised him, but he knew this wasn't the time to be modest. He had earned it in his trial, so he accepted the reward with gratitude. After leaving the room with the bag of coins in hand, Rudd couldn't help but hug it fondly. It was the first time he had such a large amount in his hands, and the relief and excitement were palpable. Finally, he could cover his expenses for a long time. For the first time, he felt like a true adventurer. It would have taken ages to accumulate such an amount diligently collecting miasma grass. Adventurers really could make good money. But he snapped out of his reverie when he noticed the unusual silence in the air. Normally, guild members mocked him when he arrived, but today was different. Maybe no one was insulting him because they had seen what had happened before, but that didn't mean they would suddenly be kind. And if he stood out more, he could see who would find his sudden rise in status suspicious, and he didn't want that. So, he decided it was better to keep making money in the miasma labyrinth as before. With that in mind, he stopped feeling gloomy and focused on the task ahead. He finally had some money, so he needed to prepare his equipment and eat whatever he wanted. First, he felt the need to go to the tool shop. Upon arriving, an item immediately caught his attention. It was a magic bag. And with that, the day ended on a high note, with Rudd feeling more hopeful and prepared for the future. When the next day arrived, Rudd ventured into the miasma labyrinth as he used to, killing the monstrous rats with ease. The fact that these creatures, which once posed a significant threat, were now defeated so easily bored him. Just 2 days ago, he would have had to avoid a group of 5 of them. Things had certainly changed. To better understand his current situation, he used his appraisal ability on the rats. Surprisingly, the ability he had obtained from consuming the cursed monster could be used even on corpses, and the rats showed to be level 9. Considering he had no trouble dealing with them, he estimated his own level to be around 20. Curious about his exact status, he took out his badge and checked his stats. To his amazement, his level was now 42, with an average attribute of 150, a significant jump from his previous stats, which were only 15, and just yesterday he was level 7. This rapid progression was unprecedented, which excited him, leading him to check the skills he had acquired. As he expected, the number of skills had drastically increased, not just by 5, but by dozens. The variety of skills added in one day was unheard of. No one had ever experienced such a phenomenon. This made Rudd more excited than ever, and the skills, both active and passive, significantly increased his overall combat abilities. With that, he thought of returning to the same labyrinth to continue increasing his power, but he remembered that when he passed by the place where he had fallen, he noticed that the wall that had been broken was now sealed. Furthermore, the new labyrinth would remain closed for a while, so returning wasn't an option. Even so, he was eager to test his new powers. He wanted to see how effective they were in the deeper floors of the Miasma Labyrinth. Although he initially planned to explore lightly, he now felt compelled to dive deeper. After all, beggars can't be choosers. So, he prepared himself and ventured further into the depths of the labyrinth, from the 6th floor to the 9th floor, and then to the 13th floor. Things remained the same. There was no challenge, and he didn't even have the chance to use his skills. It seemed these monsters weren't suitable. He needed to go even deeper to find more fitting prey. Determined, he descended to the 24th floor, where he encountered a different type of monster. This one belonged to a bipedal species he had never seen before. From the shadows, he immediately used his appraisal ability, revealing it to be a dragon race, a lizard warrior with a lot of health and balanced stats. According to the books, these creatures should fight in coordination with their companions, but this one was alone. He thought it would be worth a try. With this in mind, he launched an offensive. But unfortunately, the lizard's situational awareness was high, allowing it to notice and dodge his initial attack, escaping with only a minor injury. Even so, Rudd thought he had the advantage and believed this would be easy. But to his surprise, the lizard opted for a tactical retreat. Obviously, Rudd couldn't let his prey escape, especially since he didn't know when he would find a solitary lizard again. So, he zoomed after it. After a few more steps, he realized he wouldn't have to chase it for long. The lizard had reached a dead end. Feeling more confident, he prepared to finish it off. But as he approached, he noticed the lizard's expression had changed from panic to a smile. Instantly, Rudd realized he was in trouble. He had stupidly walked into a trap and had been deceived. The smile on the lizard's face turned into a guttural laugh, echoing through the dimly lit cave. From the shadows, more lizard warriors emerged. With their eyes gleaming with malevolent intent, Rudd's heart pounded when he realized that even with the level difference, the situation was bad. The odds had drastically shifted, but Rudd had killed monsters in groups before, and this was no different. He decided to take them down one by one, attacking the wounded lizard with brute force. He knocked it down, leaving it defenseless. Just as he was about to finish it off, another lizard blocked his attack. Before he realized it, another appeared behind him. Luckily, he managed to dodge, surprising the lizard with his quick reaction. Seeing the lizard's reaction, Rudd smiled, but his confidence quickly faded when he noticed the number of lizards had doubled. This was entirely different from the monsters he had killed in the previous labyrinth. Although few in number, these lizards were coordinated, making it difficult to reduce their numbers. But something was wrong. Even if these monsters were good at working together, using such ambush tactics and coordinating their movements to this extent was unbelievable. He realized that shortly before the lizards showed this coordination, there had been a high-pitched sound, probably a command. With this in mind, he scanned the surroundings beyond the lizardmen in front of him and saw a differently colored lizard standing behind them. Immediately, he used his appraisal ability. As expected, it was a lizard general, with much higher overall stats and level. But what caught his attention the most was an ability called Command Ability. This explained why the lizards were fighting so well and efficiently. This discovery made him smile, as he finally knew who he had to kill first. But the general also noticed his gaze and ordered everyone to kill him as quickly as possible. They charged together, but instead of facing them head-on, Rudd had another plan in mind. Using his physical boost, he brandished his sword with fury, forcing the lizards to back off and creating an opening. When the lizards thought he was about to attack them again, he used them as a platform to propel himself, dodging the other lizards and heading straight for the general. The sudden movement caught the general off guard, and his eyes widened in surprise, as he couldn't defend himself in time and took Rudd's attack head-on. But to Rudd's surprise, the lizard he thought would be cut down stood there, alive and unharmed. The general took advantage of Rudd's momentary shock to counterattack. Being so close, it was impossible for Rudd to dodge. But just like the general, the blade didn't pierce Rudd's body, as he had activated the steel body of the armor spider. With this, the general realized they were no match for him and retreated, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. This only gave Rudd the chance to analyze them more closely. Rudd wondered what had happened to his attack. He had definitely felt the impact, but there wasn't a single scratch on the general. He knew the general didn't possess an ability that increased his durability. So, it had to be the power of someone else. With this, he examined the soldiers again. Initially, he couldn't see any special abilities among them, but his attention was drawn to an injured lizard with a particularly familiar wound. Checking its stats, he noticed that its substitute ability was the reason the general survived, as the injured lizard was taking damage immediately. Rudd zoomed in on this particular lizard, plunging his sword to end its suffering. In doing so, he felt a strange connection with this lizard, a subordinate reduced to a substitute and sacrificial pawn. But now, it wouldn't have to suffer anymore. Pulling his sword from its lifeless body, he promised that the others wouldn't have to worry either, as he would make sure to finish them all off. Meanwhile, the general's eyes widened in panic as he realized what Rudd had done to his support. Rudd's next attack would surely cause real damage. With this, desperation fueled his orders, and he commanded all his minions to attack together. It was now or never. If they couldn't kill this human, they were doomed. Unfortunately for them, this was exactly what Rudd wanted. With the general joining the fight, the situation became much easier to handle. Using his thread manipulation ability, Rudd transformed into his friendly neighbor, Spider-Man. He launched himself upwards, staying out of their reach. Not only did this position him perfectly, but it also allowed him to trap the entire group in his sticky web. Snared in the sticky trap, the lizard struggled helplessly. Rudd approached the general with a victorious smile on his face, showing that he had won the battle. With a quick and decisive strike, he severed the general's head from its body, and the remaining lizards, now leaderless and trapped, were swiftly eliminated. With the immediate threat gone, it was time for Rudd to eat. This time, he wouldn't have to resort to raw meat. He came prepared with his cooking items stored in his newly acquired magic bag. Like any magical world, magic bags expanded the internal space and significantly reduced the weight of the items. Most adventurers couldn't afford such luxury, but Rudd was no longer an ordinary adventurer, allowing him to take advantage of this item. He pulled out his galvanized round frying pan, an eco-friendly wooden cutting board, and spices borrowed from his aunt. With everything ready, he began cooking with palpable excitement. In the hidden floor, he was desperate to survive, but he had always wanted to try this, and the savory aroma of cooked meat soon filled the air. Rudd skillfully seared the monster meat, adding a pinch of this and a dash of that. The meat sizzled and browned beautifully in the pan. When the meal was finally ready, the meat looked so delicious it made his mouth water. Without thinking twice, he devoured it, savoring the flavors that exploded on his tongue. Who could have imagined that monsters could taste this good? He even felt he could get addicted to it. With this realization, he knew that if he cooked the dish the right way, he might never go hungry again. The meal not only satisfied his hunger, but also granted him new abilities. Notably, he acquired the command ability. Still, He wondered how the meat could be so good. The only possibility he could think of was that it was related to the magical powers the monsters possessed. Speaking of magical power, the abilities from the Minotaur, Armor Spider, and Spotted Monster were quite useful, but there were skills he had yet to experience. After leaving the mountain labyrinth, he thought about skills like those of the Thunder Wolf and the Black Serpent. With this in mind, he decided to try them out and could also experiment with a variety of monsters on his way back. Talking about skills, he remembered that lizard with the substitute ability. This skill had proven quite interesting and useful. If he could find and consume more monsters with unique abilities, his strength and versatility would only increase. A few moments later, Rudd reached the 21st floor of the labyrinth, where he encountered cat-sized moths and venomous frogs. Without hesitation, he used his lightning cloak ability, electrocuting them instantly. The electric charge wasn't something to scoff at, as it spread easily and connected to nearby targets, leaving them all charred. This delighted him, as he realized that this ability was more versatile than he initially thought, proving effective at both short and medium ranges. The monsters here seemed to specialize in inflicting status ailments, but they had chosen the wrong opponent. Now, they became his food, turning into a meal similar to chicken fillets. Biting into them was equally delicious, with the venomous frog meat melting in his mouth. The seasoning even reminded him of Morphus, making him crave a beer. Besides the satisfying meal, he gained new abilities such as poison, temperature variation, venom scale powder, paralysis scale powder, and air slash. These were excellent additions to his growing arsenal. His attention was soon diverted by the sound of banging and human voices echoing through the cave. This excited him, as it was the first time he noticed other adventurers reaching so far into the miasma labyrinth. With this, he quickly packed his things and headed toward the voices. He might have found people who shared his interest in this labyrinth and, if he were lucky, could even exchange valuable information with them. The possibility of meeting like-minded individuals or gaining new insights about the labyrinth filled him with anticipation as he moved quickly toward the source of the commotion. For men surrounded another adventurer. It seemed they were in conflict as the lone adventurer lay bleeding on the ground, defenseless and outnumbered. However, the attackers were also battered, showing signs of the fight. Despite their numerical advantage, they couldn't believe she still had so much magic. But the leader only smiled, thinking the effort was worth it since they had captured a woman. He removed her hood to reveal her flawless face. They marveled at her beauty, but what excited them more was knowing she would make them rich. This was because elves were rare in that region, and her appearance was highly coveted, with royalty willing to pay a hefty sum for one. Their greedy celebration was interrupted by a voice echoing from behind, disappointed with the scene before him. Rudd had hoped to make some adventure friends, but instead, he found this. And although he didn't know the full story, they couldn't expect him to stand by while they ganged up on a lone adventurer. So he asked them to let the woman go. But first, the leader demanded to know who he was. Rudd just smiled and vaguely replied that he was just an adventurer for fun. Meanwhile, the elf woman, desperate to prevent Rudd from getting involved, warned him to leave, revealing that those men were adventurer hunters. This surprised Rudd, but instead of backing down, he used his appraisal ability on them, fully aware that adventurer hunters were high-level adventurers. Even so, he was shocked to find that the lowest among them was level 52. But what puzzled him even more was his inability to see any other information besides their level. This made him suspect that they had some concealment ability or anti-magic tool hiding their stats. Before Rudd could react, the leader ordered one of his men to take him down. Immediately, the Nordic man charged to kill, moving so fast that even Rudd was surprised by how quickly he closed the gap. Despite the surprise, Rudd managed to block the attack. The blonde man, impressed, sarcastically praised Rudd, noting that he was doing better than expected. Rudd responded with an insult, suggesting the blonde was just weak, which quickly enraged the man, who had serious anger issues. But now Rudd could barely stand his ground as the blonde pressed harder, shouting threats to crush his head. Even his companions smirked, confident that Rudd was finished, as they knew how unhinged their companion could get. But what they didn't expect was that Rudd had tricks up his sleeve. Using his newly acquired poison ability, he spat directly into the blonde's face, catching everyone off guard. The next thing they heard were the blonde man's screams echoing through the cave as he writhed in agony. The realization hit them hard. Rudd was a threat, almost like a monster, while Rudd only smiled menacingly at them, showing he was more dangerous than they could have imagined. Using underhanded tactics was how he, a once weak person, had survived. Moments later, the blonde's screams finally ceased as the poison melted his face and seeped into his veins, poisoning him from within and stopping his vital organs. Seeing this, the leader concluded that Rudd's poison ability must be a unique skill, making him a formidable opponent. With this realization, he ordered the remaining 3 men to attack Rudd simultaneously, and they did, moving faster than the blonde ever had. Rudd felt that if he stopped for even a second, it would be over. Despite his tireless efforts to stay ahead, these guys were relentless and coordinated, giving him no chance to recover. They pushed him into a corner, creating an opening to kill him with a single strike. Fortunately, Rudd had obtained a defensive ability, which allowed him to survive a frontal kick to the head that sent him flying several meters towards the poisonous swamp. Even the leader was shocked by Rudd's durability. He was sure the kick would have broken Rudd's neck instantly, but there he was, standing, as if it had only been a tap. The fight wasn't over yet. The brown-haired hunter approached, ready to end Rudd's life immediately. To his surprise, instead of fighting back, Rudd chose to retreat, going deeper into the swamp. Obviously, the hunter pursued him, not wanting to let him escape. But the leader ordered him to stop, reminding him that the place was a poisonous swamp. There was no guarantee he would come out alive if he went deeper, and he was sure Rudd wouldn't be able to withstand the poisonous swamp either. He would come out soon. Turning around, Rudd noticed the hunters hadn't pursued him, making him wonder how long they planned to stay in the poisonous swamp. It seemed they were still adventurers at heart, deciding to make a contest to see who would be the first to give up. Unfortunately for them, Rudd had the home advantage. He even felt lucky to have fallen into this poisonous swamp, as it was the perfect circumstance for him. Besides the usual miasma, the poisonous vapors around the swamp quickly drained the adventurer's stamina. So, he stood there and watched as they began to struggle, the swamp's effects quickly taking their toll. After a few more minutes, the hunters were breathing heavily, wondering how long he planned to stay in the swamp. It had been about 10 minutes, and they felt their heads aching and nausea setting in. Fortunately for them, they wouldn't have to wait much longer. When Rudd decided it was time to act, though he wanted to weaken them a bit more and was unaffected by the poison, he realized that more time could become an even greater burden for the injured elf. So, he approached them and mockingly asked how they felt being affected by both the poison and the miasma. The hunters, thinking he was a dead man, didn't bother with his questions and were sure they would make him pay for causing so much trouble. But as Rudd got closer, instead of showing suffering, he greeted them with a smile and revealed that he wasn't affected by any status abnormalities and didn't really know how much pain they were feeling. This immediately infuriated the hunters, who realized they had been tricked. Fueled by anger and frustration, they attacked him, although he was still in the swamp, dancing in Rudd's palm. The poison gradually drained their stamina, and the accumulated miasma reduced their stats. It was much easier for Rudd to overpower them, but being outnumbered, it was easy for him to show an opening that the brown-haired hunter exploited and attacked him. But this was just a trap set by Rudd. Now that they were where he wanted them, he quickly used his lightning cloak to electrocute the 2 hunters, and the nearest one died instantly, while the other could barely stand. In one last desperate attempt, the remaining hunter lunged at Rudd, but Rudd activated his air slash ability, cutting the hunter into pieces before he could get close. As the horror unfolded, the leader of the adventurer hunters was stunned, unable to believe what had just happened. He screamed in disbelief, demanding to know why a human possessed the abilities of a monster, but Rudd had no obligation to explain. So he simply approached for another attack. The adventurer they had previously overpowered now seemed stronger than before, or rather, they were relatively weaker, and he was now dominating them. Despite having superior combat skills compared to humans, the leader found himself at a disadvantage due to the effects of the miasma. Still, he was determined not to lose, having fought his hardest and overcome much greater enemies. So he used insincere agility to kill Rudd as he attacked, but Rudd simply met him halfway with his physical boost and split the hunter's sword in half before the blade even hit him. The next thing the leader felt was his torso separating from the lower half, and he fell lifeless and broken like a Kit Kat defeated by an overwhelming blow. A few moments later, Rudd and the elf were walking out of the labyrinth. The elf thanked Rudd for saving her, saying she didn't know what would have happened if it weren't for him. Rudd replied that it was nothing, as he couldn't leave her in that situation. But as they walked, he noticed she was trying to be brave, but her body was still affected by the miasma. Though he had done what he could for first aid, he knew she must be suffering. Putting those thoughts aside, he found it rare to see an elf in such a remote area and wondered what circumstances had led her to be hunted by adventurer hunters. His train of thought was interrupted by a sudden sound approaching. Looking in that direction, he saw a moth much larger than those he had encountered before. He guessed it was the leader of those moths, furious about what he had done to her subordinates. Immediately, he used his evaluation skill and saw that it was a large level 37 monster, with average stats of 110 and several abilities in its arsenal. Despite this, Rudd felt confident in defeating it. He had already killed many monsters, so he believed its size wouldn't be enough to defeat him, and he launched himself at the big monster. But as soon as he got closer, it used its aerial strike. With great reflexes, he dodged just in time. But the attack was so powerful that the elf was almost hit by it. This led him to ask if she was okay. Fortunately, she was, so he refocused on attacking the monster. The monster seemed to decide to fly away to create distance and attack from there. Rudd quickly showed that tactic was useless, using his own aerial strike, extending his range to cut not just the body but also the wings. This quickly irritated the big monster. With its wings crumbled, it could no longer fly, so it resorted to its paralyzing scales. But this only made Rudd laugh. This kind of attack had no effect on him. However, his composure immediately dissolved when he realized he wasn't alone. The injured elf could suffer from the attack, but it seemed he didn't need to worry about her. She demonstrated that she could control herself very well, obliterating the scales as if they weren't even there. This was a big surprise for Rudd. He hadn't expected her to have such a powerful ability, which made him even more curious about how the hunters had subdued her if she possessed this kind of strength. He realized there was more to her story that he hadn't yet discovered. But that wasn't his priority, as he still had an opponent to face. Thus, Rudd quickly advanced and killed the big monster. Instead of asking more about the elf, she approached him and started asking questions. First, she was curious, noting that poison and paralysis also didn't affect him and that his abilities were almost like those of a monster. She asked him how he had this ability, and Rudd just laughed awkwardly while trying to find a way to explain without revealing too much. Unexpectedly, the elf fainted on the spot, leading Rudd to ask if she was okay and if she had been hit by the paralyzing scales. Panting on the ground, she replied that she hadn't been hit, but it was something different. Since he had saved her, she felt he had the right to know the real reason for her situation. So, she promised to tell him the story as soon as they left the labyrinth. They hurried out of the labyrinth and rested in the nearby forest. Without the miasma hindering her breathing, the elf felt much better and, as promised, began to explain the situation. First, she thought it was fair to properly introduce herself. Her name was Alicia, a former adventurer. The name immediately caught Rudd's attention, so he quickly asked if she was the famous Alicia from the S-Rank group, and this made her smile, as it would make her story easier for him to understand. She confirmed his assumptions, revealing that she was indeed Alicia of the Blue Trails, the renowned S-level group from the Kingdom of Lutetia. Everyone knew its members, as Rudd recalled. The Blue Trails met a tragic fate that forced them to disband 5 years ago. They were overpowered by a great monster on that fateful day. They challenged the beast that awaited them in the deepest part of the S-level Abyssal Labyrinth. In that battle, their leader died. One member had to retire due to severe injuries, and another was swallowed by the labyrinth. Even Alicia didn't come out unscathed. So, she began to show Rudd what she meant, but Rudd, being an innocent pervert, misunderstood, thinking she was about to reveal her 2 treasures. Suddenly, he stood up, confused and excited, but soon realized he was being silly. Thinking she was about to reveal her two treasures, he quickly noticed that it was hidden inside Alicia's clothing. Well, it was obviously a cleavage, but it had a mark on it. Alicia then explained that the mark was a curse placed upon her. At that moment, it was the curse of Level Down, and Rudd admitted he had never heard of it, while Alicia agreed, saying she hadn't heard of it either. She traveled from place to place, and no one had ever heard of it before, let alone knew how to remove it. She even tried every possible method to break the curse, but all she could do was slow its progression. The adventurer hunters knew about her curse and planned to profit from it, even if she died when her level reached 0. Being at the mercy of those guys was something she couldn't bear, and Rudd felt sorry for her. A once-renowned adventurer reduced to this. A cruel fate, worse than instant death. There was nothing he could do, at least that's what he thought, when an idea came to mind with the skill he had just acquired. Rudd thought he could help Alicia with her curse, so he immediately took out his guild card and checked if his substitute skill did exactly what he hoped. The skill allowed him to select a target and take on their attacks and status ailments. Without hesitation, he told Alicia he wanted to try something that could help her. He explained that he needed her to accept the skill he was about to activate. She was initially confused but agreed, trusting him after everything he had done for her. With Rudd's hand on her shoulder and her guard down, he activated his substitution skill. Immediately, Alicia noticed a black aura descending down his arm. She realized the curse was being transferred to him and panicked. She knew the devastating effects of the curse and didn't want it to affect him, but she also couldn't move away, fearing it might lead to unexpected consequences. So, she quickly told him to stop, warning that at this rate, the curse would harm him too, but seeing her concern only made Rudd more determined to help. So he just held her with a warm smile, saying it was okay and she should trust him. The next thing Alicia saw was the curse materializing into a demon. This was the first time it reacted this way, as if it knew something significant was about to happen and tried to defend itself. But before it could strike, a bright light suddenly appeared. It was Rudd's unique skill, abnormal status nullification, burning the curse to its core. The demon could only scream as it disintegrated into nothing. Then, Rudd casually checked his hand, revealing a satisfied smile, confirming that his skill was working well. Alicia, on the other hand, stood there with a look of astonishment, still incredulous about what had just happened. Rudd then told her to check her guild card. She did so and was surprised to see that, although her level hadn't returned to what it was before, her status had changed from cursed to normal. That was enough to fill her with relief. The curse she had been trying to remove had finally been eliminated. Seeing her reaction, Rudd proudly explained that it was thanks to his unique ability. He had thought he could nullify her curse if he absorbed it, and was happy it had worked correctly. But he was taken aback when Alicia called him an idiot. She couldn't believe he had taken such a huge risk for someone he had just met, but her words were not malicious, they were filled with concern. She had realized that Rudd was incredibly kind and didn't want something bad to happen to someone as pure as him, or for anyone to take advantage of his kindness in this cruel world. Despite her initial outburst, Alicia was genuinely happy and relieved. She expressed her sincere gratitude for what Rudd had done, which warmed his heart. He realized that she was indeed a wonderful person, concerned about him even though she was the one suffering at that moment. An unexpected bond formed between them. Some moments passed, and the sun was setting, but Alicia and Rudd were still as animated as ever, drinking to exhaustion after such a long day. Alicia enjoyed it even more because the food was cheap and the alcohol was delicious. Rudd certainly knew a good place, and Rudd just gave a thumbs up with a forced smile because he couldn't deny the food was delicious. But he remembered that he had been kicked out the last time he was there. Even so, he noticed that Alicia seemed to be drinking too much. So, he asked if she was okay with that amount, reminding her that she had been seriously injured not long ago. But Alicia assured him she was fine, that she had recovered thanks to him. Besides, on such an auspicious day, how could she not drink? Rudd could do nothing but accept her enthusiasm. So, he asked what she planned to do from now on. Surprisingly, with a keen look and a blush on her cheeks, she replied that she would like to know more about him first, especially why he decided to become an adventurer. This was a surprise for Rudd, as it was the first time someone was interested in his story. So, he agreed to tell her. Like many stories, his began with tragedy. When he was a child, his village was attacked by monsters. Because of these monsters, he lost his family and friends. But thanks to an S-rank adventurer who rushed to the scene, he survived. He would never forget the sight of that adventurer at that moment. He was inspired. He wanted to become an S-rank adventurer like that savior someday, to save many people. That became his goal. As Rudd told his story, Alicia couldn't help but admire him. She thought that was a noble goal. Rudd then asked if she wouldn't laugh, thinking it was a childish dream. But Alicia assured him she wouldn't laugh because she herself had once dreamed of reaching S-rank, and she still intended to gain more power than she had before she was cursed. Thanks to Rudd, she could revive that dream again. She was certain that her companions were still trapped in the deepest part of the abyssal labyrinth. Whatever the outcome, she intended to challenge that monster once more. But for now, at least until they both gained enough strength to achieve their goals, she extended her hand and asked what he thought about forming a group together. As he had unique circumstances that he couldn't easily share, he planned to refuse but struggled to find a way to say it gently. Before he could say the words, someone grabbed Alicia's hand. They were the same guys who had kicked Rudd out of the restaurant a few days earlier and still looked at him with the same eyes, as if he were insignificant. Not only that, but they also dared to approach the girl who was with him. The disrespect was palpable, and Rudd couldn't let it slide. So, he grabbed the most talkative of the two and warned him to back off. Not knowing what else to do, they thought Rudd was still the same guy they could easily defeat. So, the blonde grabbed him by the collar and threatened him, escalating the tension and bringing them to the brink of a fight. Luckily for them, Alicia decided to intervene. She wouldn't let anyone spoil her celebration. So, she reminded the guys that it was a bar, and if they were going to fight, they should do it to see who could drink more. With that, the celebration continued, with everyone satisfied and drunk. As they drank beer, the cheers grew louder. Time passed, and Alicia and the others became more and more intoxicated. But the beer kept flowing non-stop, one mug after another, which excited the spectators who had never seen a competition like that before. The bar was more lively than ever. Some moments passed, and the bald guy was unconscious. The blonde was unconscious, and only Alicia remained standing, with a triumphant smile on her face. She was proud to show them what a true elf was capable of, and the crowd cheered, delighted to see her victory. This boosted Alicia's ego even more. When it came to drinking, this led her to look at Rudd with a smug face, seeking his approval. And he didn't disappoint, giving her a thumbs up for winning. After that, they went to a quieter place to continue their conversation. But Alicia, now very drunk, just laughed when Rudd praised her for doing so well, considering she had already drunk a lot before the drinking contest. She explained it was only because he was her benefactor. She hadn't fallen so low as to stay quiet while he was disrespected like that. Before she could finish the sentence, the alcohol caught up with her, making her dizzy. She fell asleep on Rudd, which he found hilarious and amusing. Still, Rudd decided to use his substitution skill once again, removing most of her drunkenness. This surprised Alicia, but it was a welcome surprise, as she couldn't believe how wonderful his skill was. She suggested they should form a group together. But before that, she wanted to enjoy the night and continue drinking a little more, lifting everyone's spirits once again. However, she noticed it was a shame not to be able to try their special dish, the grilled barn meuse with salt. The owner overheard and explained that it was because a monster had taken up residence in the Barness fishing grounds. He had already sent a request to the guild, but it seemed that all the best adventurers were out at the moment. However, since they themselves were adventurers, the owner took the opportunity to ask if they would be willing to accept the request. They agreed, and the next day, they were already on a boat in the Barnum fishing ground. The scenery was beautiful, a sea full of islands that made it look like they were sailing on a river. However, they didn't care much about the landscape, as they were focused on defeating the monsters quickly so they could savor the special dishes. Unexpectedly, a water bullet suddenly shot out of the water, but Rudd dodged it and smiled, realizing they wouldn't need to search for long, as the monster had already found them. But their smiles faded when they saw the large number of creatures emerging from the water. The situation was more alarming than they had expected. The owner had only recently requested help, but the monster population had already increased drastically. With that, Rudd used his assessment skill and identified the creatures as level 23 Gorbs, with average attributes of 35 and 3 skills, mainly water bullets and high-speed swimming. But that didn't explain why there were so many. Before he could find answers, the Gorb launched a relentless barrage of aquatic attacks. The sheer number of attacks made it difficult for Rudd to defend himself on the unstable boat. So, Rudd decided he needed a different approach. He jumped into the water, using himself as bait. As he swam closer, the Gorb's behavior confirmed his suspicion. They weren't attacking or fleeing. They were guarding something. The sight of what was below made Rudd's eyes widen in shock. He saw a horrendous, monstrous creature with multiple tentacles and crab-like legs rising from the seabed. Immediately, he used his assessment skill and discovered it was a level 38 tentacle monster, with overwhelming strength and average health points of 200, in addition to having 2 new skills, autonomy and accelerated healing. But what surprised him even more was the discovery that at the tips of its tentacles were crab-like shells that detached from the main body and suddenly transformed into Gorbs. This explained their rapid reproduction. If he didn't defeat the tentacles now, there was no point in continuing to kill the Gorbs. Since the creatures showed no signs of attacking, Rudd decided to retreat and prepare for a more strategic attack. However, this was exactly what the cunning tentacle monster wanted. As soon as Rudd turned, it seized the opportunity to grab his legs and pull him to the bottom of the ocean, and the Gorbs quickly followed, swarming around him with their jaws wide open, ready to devour him alive. However, they weren't lucky, as they were up against Rudd. He then enveloped them in his lightning cape once again, electrocuting the surrounding fish while simultaneously damaging the tentacle monster. He kept the skill active with the intent to kill the creature. But the monster's cunning nature showed again, as it detached the tentacles holding Rudd. Seeing this, Rudd was sure this was the autonomy skill in action. Now he realized how cunning this boss monster truly was. However, his line of thought was interrupted when he noticed the tentacle monster was already close and about to launch its tentacles again. Rudd knew it was best not to fight while running out of breath. So, he tugged hard on his rope to signal Alicia on the boat and left everything to her. And as always, she did not disappoint. Alicia quickly understood the signal and sprang into action, using her wind magic to pull the rope as fast as possible. With her help, Rudd managed to escape the tentacle monster's attack just in time. Shortly after, he returned to the shore, exhausted from the ordeal. But after catching his breath, he thanked Alicia and explained the situation, saying there was a boss at the bottom of the sea that continuously produced Gorbs. It also had an accelerated healing ability. Therefore, he needed to hurry back before it fully recovered. Alicia thought this was a bad idea, as the monsters had a significant advantage over them in the water, and her magic wouldn't reach down there unless Rudd had a plan in mind that he wanted to share. Rudd confirmed that he had a plan, but he couldn't easily share it. What he was about to do was considered taboo, not just for an adventurer, but for everyone in that world. So he hesitated, torn between revealing his secret or giving up and letting the monsters live another day. But he knew that if they weren't controlled, they could become more powerful and disrupt the ecosystem, endangering those living near the sea. He couldn't let innocent people suffer because he was afraid to reveal his abilities. Alicia was no longer a stranger, as she had trusted him with her curse and even formed a group with him. So, he felt he should reciprocate. With determination, he turned to Alicia and said he needed to share something important, but made her promise not to tell anyone. Alicia agreed but was shocked when Rudd revealed his secret. Moments later, back at the bottom of the sea, the boss was working tirelessly to create more sea minions, confident that the adventurer had been driven away. To its surprise, a figure quickly approached from above. It was the same adventurer as before, using the high-speed swimming ability of its minions. Rudd effortlessly cut through the monstrous fish, and the boss reacted quickly, extending several tentacles to stop him, but Rudd passed through them easily, as if they were butter, closing the distance and stabbing the creature at its weak point. Still, the boss thought it had a chance to counterattack, so it launched another attack, but Rudd just smiled and activated his lightning mantle, electrocuting from within. With that, he successfully killed the boss, and all the remaining fish monsters around him also fell. The fishing ground should now return to its peaceful state. But Rudd's mind was troubled by thoughts of Alicia after she saw him devour a monster. He wondered how she felt about him, what she would say when they returned. The uncertainty tormented him, but he braced himself for what was to come. When he reached the shore, his eyes filled with dread when he saw no sign of Alicia. Her absence hit him hard. Still, he forced a smile as he questioned why he had assumed she would wait for him. He regained hope, but as he walked back, despite the smile he wore, it was evident his body was collapsing under the weight of his emotions. But all of this faded when he heard Alicia's voice again. She emerged from the bushes carrying a bunch of wood and branches she had collected near the forest and was relieved to see he didn't appear injured. Without missing a beat, she continued with her task, gathering the branches she had collected for a fire, explaining that she couldn't just sit and wait and wanted to help him dry his clothes. Rudd stood there, shocked by her casual demeanor after discovering what he was doing with the monsters. He then asked if she was really okay with it, and she admitted that it surprised her a little, but the fact that he trusted her enough to reveal his secrets made her happier than anything else. With that, a sudden spark made his world more colorful than before, and her smile helped reinforce it. He thanked her, feeling a warmth he hadn't felt in a long time. With his worries out of the way, he confidently revealed that he also wanted to obtain the boss's meat. So, he cut off a piece to bring back, but thought it would be strange if only he ate. So he brought back some Barnus fish as well. Before he could even finish his sentence, Alicia's eyes lit up with excitement, and she told him she would love to eat them, her enthusiasm making him smile. She was completely different from anyone he knew, subverting all the expectations he had. They prepared the food together. Meanwhile, Rudd decided it might be the right time to tell her about the first time he ate a monster. A few moments later, night enveloped the land, and only the campfire illuminated the surroundings. Alicia was cheerfully eating the food Rudd had prepared, listening attentively to his story. She commented that there was a reason behind his transformation, and Rudd could only laugh at the irony of the unfortunate event that brought a weakling a little closer to his dream. Alicia couldn't help but be thankful for that event too, as Rudd had used his newfound power to save her from adventurer hunters and break her curse. As she savored the meal, Alicia commented on how surprisingly delicious the cooked monster meat was. Rudd confirmed her observation with a smile, explaining that monsters taste very good when cooked properly. He mentioned that he no longer needed to eat them but wanted to try cooking them right. When he offered her some, Alicia declined, as she didn't want to risk having the same symptoms he had experienced. With that out of the way and Rudd opening up to her, Alicia asked again if he was willing to join her party, but Rudd, still wary of past betrayals, needed to be sure of her intentions. He asked why she was so eager to join him when she could have met stronger adventurers. Alicia explained that it had been 5 years since she was cursed. Even if her former companions hadn't died in the labyrinth, considering the human lifespan, many might have retired. Moreover, most frontline adventurers have a few screws loose, making it hard to trust her life to them. To venture together, she wanted someone she could trust to watch her back and believed Rudd was that person. This answer was well received by Rudd, as trust was what he sought as well. With this understanding, he finally agreed to form a party with Alicia. The night seemed warmer than ever, as their newfound companionship brought a sense of hope and warmth to the cold world they navigated. The scene shifts to a sunny day at the Adventurers Guild in Bologna. Alicia is very excited to start the first job with her newest partner. Rudd makes a not-so-enthusiastic face and doubts they will find a good mission with one of them being rank E. Alicia agrees with him and replies that for their first time. She doesn't finish the sentence, leaving an air of mystery. She approaches the receptionist, who greets them with the usual expression. Alicia says that she and Rudd are forming a group from that day on and, showing a badge, asks if the receptionist could register them. The receptionist can hardly believe that Alicia is a rank S adventurer. She analyzes all of Alicia's skills and is impressed by the levels. The receptionist, in disbelief, asks how someone like Alicia is with the miasma butcher. Alicia didn't like the receptionist offending Rudd, and she made a disapproving face, causing the receptionist to laugh awkwardly and hurry to register them. Alicia then asks what the procedures are to raise Rudd's rank, as she wants to do that. The receptionist examines the papers and says that Rudd has gathered enough achievements but still lacks battle accomplishments. The elf then asks for the most difficult subjugation mission they have, as she and Rudd will take it together. The scene shifts to the forest on the outskirts of Bologna. Alicia and Rudd need to exterminate a pack of gray wolves. Rudd uses his spider abilities against the wolves and strikes them with great effectiveness. More wolves start chasing Rudd, who tells Alicia that those are all hers. She agrees, stating that she's going. She activates her elf power and is enveloped by a green mist. Rudd is impressed to see Alicia's unique ability in action. A type of spirit, resembling some sort of bird with wings and claws on its feet, appears. With her power in action, she charges at the wolves. Alicia unleashes the cutting whirlwind power on the wolves, making them dissipate. With the battle over, Rudd is impressed by Alicia's immense strength, dreaming that there's no way to avoid her power. Alicia says that her power from before she was cursed is really not manifesting. Rudd nods, thinking he couldn't imagine what Alicia would be like at full strength. Suddenly, Rudd is surprised by more wolves attacking from behind. He looks, gritting his teeth, surprised that so many wolves were still hiding. Unable to block the wolf in time, Rudd finds himself in a difficult situation as the ferocious wolf quickly approaches his face. But fortunately, his companion Alicia was alert and quickly activated her power. Rudd simply disappears, and the wolves are left confused, looking for him. One of the wolves notices something strange above. It's Alicia and Rudd, who seem to be floating in the sky, and Rudd is very excited to see what Alicia is capable of. He thanks Alicia, saying she saved him, but she says that if he wants to thank someone, he should thank the mini spirit. But Alicia warns that they cannot let their guard down. She says that besides the wolves down below, there are about 5 more in the bushes watching them, and there are probably more hidden. Rudd says it's his turn, and Alicia is curious about his words. Echoing sound circles from his mouth, he activated his echolocation ability to locate the wolves. The sound waves reached the wolves, making them growl, allowing Rudd to detect where they were. Rudd says that, adding to those they had already seen, there are about 30 of them, and they can complete the objective in one go. Rudd tells Alicia to attack where he indicates, and she is still paralyzed, trying to understand. The wolves noticed a strong green light above them. Realizing they were under attack, they quickly ran. Meanwhile, Alicia was up there, launching her powers at them. Rudd started analyzing the situation and thought that echolocation loses precision in open spaces, and Alicia couldn't target multiple enemies at once. But if they attacked in a circle, they could turn the wolves into ashes in one spot. Sighing with exhaustion, Alicia said she had done her part, and now it was Rudd's turn. The young man walked ominously behind the wolves, preparing for his next attack. He unleashed one of his abilities, the paralyzing breath, on the wolves. Immediately, the animals fell to the ground, utterly defeated. Proud of the result, Rudd sheathed his sword. It was the end of another day. Rudd and Alicia stood before a pile of dead wolves, counting the number they had encountered that day, totaling 52 wolves. Alicia could hardly believe the number of wolves they had found. Rudd said that perhaps their numbers had really increased on a large scale. Taking advantage of the moment, Rudd asked about the magic Alicia used earlier. Pointing to the mini spirit, Alicia said she could use spirit magic that exists in nature, and that one was Sylphide. She continued, saying that spirits are usually everywhere, even if they're not visible, but to use their magic, you first need to use your magic as compensation, and then you can conjure powerful magic using little MP. And as you saw earlier, I can cause that phenomenon that allows us to float, Alicia said while Rudd watched the little Sylphide. Rudd said he had never heard of wind magic as strong as Alicia's, while Sylphide played with his hair. Until the moment she pulled the young man's hair, causing him pain. Alicia enjoyed seeing Sylphide teasing Rudd, saying she loves to cause trouble, and the more he complains, the more she will tease him. Night approached, and Alicia said they needed to return quickly. Rudd felt a bit unsteady in the air, and Alicia said they would fly part of the way. They enjoyed themselves while flying back, especially Rudd, as it was a new experience for him. He asked Alicia what other types of magic she could use. She replied that she specialized in water, ice, light, and earth magic, but wasn't good with dark and fire spirits. She explained that if a spirit doesn't have good compatibility with you, it will demand a huge amount of magic, or it might mean the spirit won't even lend its powers. This shows that Sylphide likes you too, Alicia said to Rudd since Sylphide allowed Rudd to float. Rudd listened while observing Sylphide closely. He found it hard to believe Sylphide liked him, as the little spirit didn't stop bothering him, and Alicia enjoyed the situation. Suddenly, something caught Rudd's attention, and even Sylphide stopped playing. They saw smoke coming from what seemed to be a village. A terrible monster appeared to be terrorizing the place. People ran, trying to escape the flames. A young man seemed to try to face the beast with a shield and sword, with another person right behind him. They lamented that the gray wolves weren't the only monsters in that area and wondered what that creature was doing in the village. They said the monster was a Baphomet. The monster launched a fire beam at them. With only a shield and sword, the man was paralyzed. But the fire beam was stopped by a water jet before it could hit the two men. The man peeked over the shield to see what had happened. A third person appeared, and both the man and the monster were confused about what was happening. Luckily for the men, Rudd appeared with his water bullet ability. The monster didn't seem pleased with the unexpected visitor. Alicia emerged from behind the men and asked if they were okay, and one of them replied affirmatively and thanked her. Alicia said they would take care of that monster and asked the men to summarize the situation. Meanwhile, Rudd advanced closer to the monster. Using one of his abilities, he analyzed the monster and realized that even though its level was below that of the Lizard General, its stats were on another level. Rudd thought this meant the monster was different from common monsters. The abilities of this monster were principles of magic. Rudd's fire magic was very weak. It wasn't something he could use in battles. Advancing towards the monster, Rudd thought that if he devoured the monster, he could acquire its abilities. Smiling, he imagined that by acquiring these abilities, he could use magic in battle as well. But before Rudd could strike the monster, it blocked the attack with little effort. The young man became nervous, realizing the monster had blocked his attack. Rudd wondered if this was the Iron Claw ability and concluded that if it was, then he would have to use brute force. The monster then gathered its firepower into 2 round discs. The young man found himself in trouble in such a situation. Suddenly, a very strong explosion occurred in the area. Alicia was startled by the unexpected explosion and looked towards it. She called out for Rudd upon seeing him dodge the explosion. Worried, she asked if he was okay. He replied affirmatively, but without losing focus on the battle. He noticed that the monster had fired 2 of its powerful discs, probably keeping the other 2 for its defense. This monster was a tough opponent. Rudd suggested they talk to exchange information while the monster was not attacking. Alicia said that the villagers hadn't evacuated yet. She had asked other people to help evacuate the area, but still wanted to avoid harming those who were still there. She also warned Rudd that she wouldn't be able to use powerful magic to defeat the monster in one go. Rudd knew that Alicia was low on magic due to the previous fight and their flight, so they couldn't rely on her spirit magic. Alicia told Rudd to let her handle the magic and asked him to trust her, which made Rudd a little apprehensive. Staring at the monster with determination, the young man ran towards the creature to attack it. With just a movement of its fingers, the creature could launch fire rays at the young man. But he fiercely dodged them, saying to himself to keep advancing without losing focus. Rudd ran as fast as lightning towards his opponent. At that exact moment, Alicia boosted Rudd using her magic. Alicia's magic accompanied Rudd as he faced the monster's firepower. Alicia's magic managed to cancel the monster's magic, creating an opening between Rudd and the monster. He was impressed, wondering if Alicia used an opposite attribute magic of equivalent power to cancel the monster's magic. At that moment, the enraged monster activated a very powerful magic, causing huge rocks to float. Clearly, its intention was to hit its enemies with these rocks, and it did so by just moving its hands towards the young people. Alicia quickly acted, defending them with her magic, and asked Rudd to advance towards the monster. In a very epic scene, the monster was on one side, Rudd in the middle advancing, and Alicia seemed to use her own rocks to counterattack the monster. Alicia's rocks clashed with the monster's rocks, creating a defensive barrier so Rudd wouldn't get hit. Rudd was impressed that Alicia was using rocks of the same mass to counter the monster's rocks, thus saving her magic. He found it incredible how she had such absurd control over her magic. But he knew that this was expected of a former rank S. Now with a clear path, Rudd launched himself at the monster without hesitation. But before the final attack, he activated physical reinforcement to strike the beast. Immediately, Rudd swung his sword at the creature, cutting off its fingers. The monster, not conceding defeat, still tried to attack Rudd with its other hand. But the young man didn't even need to move because a firepower surged from behind him, hitting the monster. The monster was struck in the mouth by the firepower, which started burning its face. This attack came from Alicia. She felt proud of herself and asked the monster how it felt tasting its own power. Finally, the monster was completely dissipated by the fire. Meanwhile, the villagers watched the flames consuming the village, hoping that the adventurers would defeat the monster. One of them wondered about the explosion and the terrible screams, asking if it could mean the monster had been defeated. An older man lamented that if he weren't injured, he could have stayed behind to help the adventurers. But soon, they were surprised by Alicia's presence. The man was astonished to see Alicia, and she thanked him for helping to evacuate the area. He was very happy and in disbelief, affirming that she was okay. She responded with a thumbs up and said that the Baphomet had been defeated. With a worried look, she said that she only delivered a fatal blow, but if it managed to survive, it could attack again. So, they decided it was best for Alicia and Rudd to go after the monster to ensure it didn't survive. Alicia said she needed a small favor, and the man immediately offered to do anything within their power. A stomach rumbling noise was heard. It was Alicia, who was hungry, and she sheepishly asked if they had some food to share with her. In the forest, Rudd was alone, preparing his monster meat meal. Alicia emerged from the trees, announcing her return, which made Rudd very happy. Rudd asked how the villagers were, and she replied that it seemed everyone managed to evacuate thanks to those two men. She said she told the villagers she was going after the Baphomet, so they wouldn't suspect its body had disappeared. The young man apologized for having to do that, but thanked her. The food was ready, and Rudd could hardly wait to try another monster dish, saying it looked delicious. He had made Baphomet soup. He just added a few more spices, and it was ready. He tasted his dish. Rudd said it still had a strong goat flavor, but despite that, it was delicious, and Alicia watched the strange scene. Immediately, Rudd received all the Baphomet's abilities. Alicia commented that it seemed delicious, but she didn't finish the sentence. She continued, saying that watching someone eat a humanoid monster was a bit strange. These words caused some discomfort in Rudd. He began to reflect, thinking that she was right and that it was a bit scary that he had gotten used to it. But soon, Rudd's reflection was interrupted by guests. A group of pigs approached. They were Stampigs. Alicia was startled by their presence, but Rudd wasn't too surprised and questioned if there weren't too many monsters in that region. With no other option but to fight, Rudd decided to face them. But he soon seemed very excited when he saw the opportunity to test his combat magic. Silence fell over the place as Rudd stood with his hands towards the pigs. He and Alicia waited for some power to emerge, but nothing happened. Then the pig wasted no time and used its fast step ability to run towards its prey. Rudd was terrified, not knowing what to do. The beast charged through them like lightning, destroying everything in its path, even knocking Rudd's meal to the ground. Alicia was a bit upset because she expected Rudd to be able to use his magic now. Rudd stated that he was low on magic and wouldn't be very useful at the moment, which surprised Alicia. Rudd lamented over his dinner, saying that he drained all the blood to remove the monster's impurity and spent a lot of time doing it. Gritting his teeth in frustration, he said he really wanted to savor that meat he had carefully seasoned, and continued saying that now the pigs would pay for it. He shouted furiously, saying the pigs would give up their meat. But Alicia stopped him, pulling him by the clothes and asking him to calm down. She explained to Rudd that the ability the pigs were using was called Fast Step, which increased their sprint power, making any attack considerably strong. Even though it wasn't very favorable, They should fight from a distance to avoid the reach of the fast step. Alicia said, in other words, they needed to run away. She said this while they ran from the pigs. It was already very dark at night. The pigs seemed to be looking for something. Alicia and Rudd hid up in a tree, and he thought they had lost the pigs. The pigs were below, trying to find the duo. Seizing the moment, Alicia whispered and asked about the magic he couldn't conjure earlier. Rudd said he never had problems activating the abilities he acquired, at least until now. She suggested he check his abilities, making him remember to do that. Rudd analyzed his abilities through his badge. She found it strange because he was supposed to understand the abilities instinctively. Alicia said that if he still couldn't use them, it could only mean one thing. She continued, saying that Rudd's brain was so limited that he couldn't comprehend the magics. Rudd asked if what she said wasn't a bit cruel. She resumed her investigation, saying that Rudd could still use fire magic, even if it was weak. So perhaps the reasoning about the limited brain wasn't a good explanation for Rudd not being able to use the magics. But soon, she found a line of reasoning that could make sense and might be the solution. If you like this video, please subscribe, leave a like and comment for the next part.